Hi there. Welcome to the From Lab to Launch podcast by Qualio, where we share inspiring stories from the people on the front lines of life sciences. Tune in and leave inspired to bring your life-saving products to the world. Now let's get started with Robert, Qualio founder and CEO, and our show host.
I'm really excited to welcome Gill Berry as a guest in our From Lab to Launch podcast today. Gill is a qualified clinical nurse specialist, and some of her more recent roles include working in education, practice development facilitation, and project management. Gill is driven by quality, patient safety, and person-centered care. She holds an HDIP in CCU nursing, PGD infection prevention and control, PGC in clinical trials management in pharmaceutical medicine, and PGC in medical affairs in pharmaceutical medicine. She also has certifications in quality and safety. With this knowledge, Gill founded PerCen Technologies in 2019 in response to challenges that she felt were not being addressed in healthcare. They are supported by the first national HI call by the Health Innovation Hub in Ireland. It was set up to create person-centered innovative solutions to clinical unmet needs. Its aim is to use scientific knowledge and the latest technologies to complement clinical evidence-based practice. Let's bring Gill in. Thank you for being part of the journey and for sticking with us through all the past year. I guess the first thing I'd love to understand is, could you tell me a bit more about, I believe it's pronounced PerCen Technologies, the company you started in 2019?
So PER with the capital
Yeah.
P and CEM with the capital C. So it's PerCen Technologies. Basically, it can be pronounced person, but it's person-centered.
Okay.
So it represents person-centered. Yeah.
Obvious when you know the answer. So tell me, what made you start the company?
I suppose I've been in healthcare for nearly 25 years at this stage, Robert, and I had been working on lots of innovations as an entrepreneur within the system at the HSC, which is our public sector health area or health boards. And I'd been working on many different projects in my own time as well. And one particular one was electronic risk assessment and screening tools. And the common denominator for the electronic risk assessment and screening tool was the person's weight. So it became, I suppose, looking at the innovation as, most people's weights were being done, and there, once the electronic assessment was being adapted, was very good, but there was a cohort of patients who were not being adapted to. And one of them, it was actually the immobile patient, the patient in the bed who couldn't actually be weighed conveniently, easily. So I was looking to see whether there was any improvements in relation to weighing a patient, and there wasn't. And I had been had that be in my bonnet for a while, and I submitted that to our national health innovation hub in Ireland, and basically saying this is a need and a want. And like everything else in life, you're gonna, if you want to do something about it, you have to do it yourself. So I started collaborating then with Tyndall Institute, who you would know down in Cork.
Yes, of course.
To do a proof of concept for a particular device. Now that's, I'm not saying on hold, but at the minute, it would need major R&D and investment to go further. But I suppose that's kind of why. And in order to get the collaboration as well, I had to set up a company in order to get some European funding for Tyndall Institute. So that's the story behind that one.
And I want to rewind a small bit, because you're talking about the act of weighing people as if it was some complex, endeavor. And I think you mentioned for immobile patients, that's clearly a bit more complex than stepping on the scales. Is how it's done today, like just stepping on the scales? That's pretty much it.
Well, there's lots of variables, Robert. It would be, obviously
I'll try not to nerd out too much on this now, but yeah.
Yeah, no, it's fine. For somebody who wants to step on a scale, that's fine if they can do it, if they have the gait and the balance. But for other people, might be stroked, might be on bed rest, there might be burns, you name it. It's not that simple. So then there's the hoist system, which you probably would have seen a hoist in your day. It's like a huge hammock that you put under and quite undignified. And that is a huge issue in itself. So I suppose it's not as simple as you say. And 10% of people who go into hospital are malnourished, and 10% of the population. So in order to get the risk assessment for that, you really need accurate weight. And unfortunately, there are other models where beds can be weighed, etc., but they're not readily available. And it's not only healthcare that needs it, it's people at home. keeping people well
Yeah.
enough at home. It's a huge need as well. So that's why I set up PerCen as per
Yeah.
se. But as I say, that's the
Yeah.
beginning of a story. The story hasn't finished there.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And I wanted to pause on that because it sounds like such a trivial thing that some of us do a lot, some of us don't do very often, but we all know what it's like to weigh ourselves. And it's you often forget in the healthcare setting that these things are far from simple, right? You have all these edge cases that you have to solve for. And that's one I had never thought about myself, but now that you've said it, it seems incredibly obvious. So thanks for sharing. And you're doing
Absolutely.
that, and you were working in like your nursing career in various different areas until that moment. That's correct.
Yeah. So I took a career
Yeah.
break from my
Yeah.
position at present. So my position at present was nurse practice development,
Hmm.
which would be absolutely everything from policy formation to education, basically ensuring evidence-based practice is
Yeah.
in everyday practice. And even though it was nursing, it was also
Yeah.
multidisciplinary along the line. So
Yeah. Well,
that was my last role. Yeah.
in Ireland, I think nursing has been transforming an awful lot. Like you said, about 25 years of experience. I think nursing is probably a great launch pad to experience different areas because I think it's transformed a lot in my lifetime in Ireland and a lot of different avenues to explore and get experience. So it's great to see it come out and things like this that you're able to do. So your nursing career, you started PerCen Technologies to work on that project with the Tyndall Institute in Cork. I have to keep mentioning Cork every time I can. I can't help it. So you started that. You're also working with the open source ventilator group with the Empower Her network in Ireland as well. So maybe getting to the next thing, how did you go from all of that to working with the open source ventilator group? It feels like you
Yeah.
you have more than 160 hours in your week.
It was pretty much like that for the beginning of the pandemic, but I suppose I'll step back. The
Yeah.
Empower Her program was actually my first little touch base. So I'm not actually working
Hmm.
with the Empower. I actually was a participant on the Empower Her program. So that would have been my first, stepping stone into entrepreneurship. So as I was working in the hospital and thinking about taking a career break, they had started the Empower Her program in the west of Ireland.
Uh,
It was part of so it was promoting female entrepreneurs in the west of Ireland, and it's where you just kind of had a guided education. So it was 1 day a week I signed to go to that program. So that comes from the Empower Her. I'm
hmm.
involved in Network Ireland, I suppose, as well in terms of female entrepreneurship in Ireland, and I would coordinate in the alumni for EIT Health, which is a European kind of innovation
Yeah.
technology group as well. So in healthcare. So that's kind of where I suppose I am, and then obviously PerCen Technologies as well, and trying to, as I say, trying to loose ends. The open source ventilator group we actually started initially. They were looking at the ventilator group, and I was helping a few different groups at that stage. But within a week of the ventilator group, I suppose it's not that I broke free. We kind of had to make a
Hmm.
choice. The ventilator is awful important, and I have over 15 16 years of cardiac coronary
Yeah.
care experience, so I absolutely know what a ventilator is needed for. But unfortunately, if you don't have staff, or if you don't have facilities, or don't have tools,
Hmm.
that's the end game. You don't actually, it's not that you don't need the ventilators, there's other important things we could do to stop the chain of infection. So I would have created the OSVX, which was the everything other than the ventilators. So I put
Yeah.
together a brief, because I have different strings to my bow. I would be specialised in infection prevention and control, coronary care, as I've mentioned before, clinical trials management in pharmaceutical medicine, and medical affairs, quality. So a lot of those areas kind of combined, especially with the infection control, to actually put together a process. So early March had put together a process of, it sounds ridiculous, about 45 projects or briefs, where if we had
Hmm.
people or facilities, we could actually work on them. So it was everything from COVID, we called it like education, right through to PPE, through to the Fluid app, which Qualio and everything have been involved with. Um, and other, contact tracing for frontline users and patient interaction tools. So we put together like 45 things that could help, that we knew we could do. using smart scale, and you could do under quality regime. So, and that's what happened. And we had 1,500 volunteers came on board the back door through Twitter, through LinkedIn. And actually we ended up working as much as we could on as many of those projects that were viable, to bring forward. We weren't going down the route of reagents or anything like that. And because it was, the companies and majorly doing those things, so we weren't going to go into that space with regulatory, but we were doing as much as we could possibly do. So
I'm just looking like at your site as you're saying that, and like face shields, face masks, neck and airway support, biohazard suits, ice shields. These are all the things that were just in such short supply, and enormous cross geo work went into coordinating the supply chain. So being able, I think that's a really huge thing you folks did, trying to help.
Yeah, we did, and that the website really doesn't take onus on it, because we didn't have OSVX ourselves, didn't have full ownership on that website. So a lot of the projects we finished, they wouldn't even be up. They they haven't frequented on that. They would have went direct to source, direct to procurement people, just or different heads of quality in different organizations. So actually that website, unfortunately, if there was enough hours in a day, I'd love to put something completely new up there.
Probably not the best use of your time.
It doesn't really, it reflects a certain amount, but it doesn't reflect the overall and the outcomes. It's the outcomes that have been reflected. Some of the stuff was really, really good. Laundry processes, fluid apps, they're not even up there, but
so there's so much in that. I could spend hours, but maybe start with telling me, how did you possibly work in a team that large? And we see things like this as some open source like software products, right? But they tend to happen over time, and it's not life and death if it doesn't work. It's something that gets built in the developer community. How did 1,500 people collaborate on all these different areas?
Yeah, no, I suppose that 1,500 or people joined. To be honest with you, we probably had about 400 working continuously.
1,500,
So we broke it down. So and I was so fortunate because Roisin Lyons as well, she helped me collaborate and set up the Slack channel. So I was very, very fortunate. And Tim is another guy who actually came in, and he was the community coordinator as such. So every project we had, we put 2 project managers on. So we started off with a full brief for each thing. So, the reason behind it, why we wanted, etc., etc. And then we ended up just bringing groups. So people levitated to what they kind of liked naturally. They started in Slack channel. It was all about communication. So we had 60,000 entries in the Slack channel until we could not afford to pay the subscription fee, but we had 60,000 entries in the Slack channel. So we actually had 2 project managers assigned to each Slack channel that was actually taking leverage. Not all of the projects took leverage naturally enough. And then from that, it meant that if anyone was off, if anyone was sick, if anyone was gone back to work, this was in the lockdown period as well. So it was, people wanted something to do. People wanted to help. Not everybody, and most were from engineering. So it was engineering, it was mainly STEAM. So it was like science, engineering, crossover with art and technology. So it was a very, very interesting mix of people we had on. And it was basically, for some people, it was their lifeline. And then for others, it was just, they just really wanted to help, and they gave 2-3 hours a week. But some people actually gave days and days, 18 hours a day in my case, which was madness, but
I'm still not sure I understand how you managed to make it all work, but just congrats on that. That's a huge, huge undertaking. And you've gotten, how many projects are now like available for people to, actually get into the community for use?
Yeah, see that, I mean, I don't mean that there with where the challenge lies. There'll be 5 or 6 big projects that were submitted to quality improvement teams, etc. I know lots of, I can't even quantify, because I know, teams from New Zealand and different parts of the world actually had used our education, and it's not that we just didn't have the capacity for follow-up. But I know 5 or 6 really, really good projects went to our own organizations in Ireland, which, as I say, it did now. They didn't follow through on some of them. And I know for a fact, we are in a very challenging state in Ireland at the moment, as you're probably aware.
Yes, of course.
And I know it would have been some of the projects would have been very helpful, but they were used in nursing homes. They were used in various other areas. Our contact tracing frontline users were adapted by the company that was helping us. They ended up adapting them for like sports, where people for nursing homes, for boxing societies, you name it. So regardless, I think we were really, it wasn't about products, it was about getting the knowledge base there. So we were like a knowledge exchange and a skills exchange as well as everything else. So lots of PhDs came out of it, lots of individuals brought other stuff, people dropped in and dropped out, and they did take a lot of information. I couldn't quantify exactly what has come out of it, but a lot has come out of it, Robert. So
where does it go from here, do you think?
To be totally honest with you, after 6 months, it had burned. I don't mean burnt out. People had got to that certain stage. The original, the ventilator group, they were, because we weren't an incorporated group, they kind of, I suppose the time was done in it. But for other projects that we continued, including the Fluid app, we continued to collaborate off site, because every time you entered in Slack, you were actually removing other information you had there. So we continued a lot of it off the Slack site. So we were more than a Slack channel. We were, we were a proper community. So for the likes of the Fluid app, that was done as a cross collaboration with healthcare, with the Irish Heart Foundation. I mean, the app itself was ourselves, on OSVX, but it was definitely a cross collaboration, and that's continued off site, as it were, along with a few other projects.
Any lessons learned stand out now, looking back, knowing that it's almost a year ago this all began?
Oh yeah, loads of
Maybe if you can
lessons
share.
learned. Do you want a list? Oh my God. Look, people genuinely are absolutely fantastic. I mean, we even, in terms of leadership and that, we've seen everything from empathy, transparency, the most wonderful people, as OSVX, and I'm not joking you, we had like over the biker group BCT, so which was Bravo Charlie Tango, was formed out of our group on day 2. I'm not sure if you've seen any of this. And then Mary was Master All Ireland. She joined us as well. So the power of the people in the community in Ireland was absolutely amazing. But you did have one or two, other things that mightn't have been as good. But I would say to start something like this again, you need ownership. You need ownership on it, and an added on Slack channel doesn't make ownership. And it's not about control by any means. It's about accountability, and all of those things you need to ensure you have quality kind of set up. So that's probably all I change.
That's not much. That's good. I thought I was getting a list. I was going to sit back and have a cup of coffee here, but no, that's good.
We could have, so maybe not even a cup of coffee. Maybe we need something stronger for a real list. But
it's 10 a.m. here in the Bay Area, so it's a bit early for me, but some other time.
Oh yeah, that's it. And I've gone teetotal for a while as well, after the Christmas. But look, I suppose would do it all again, absolutely. But I would say a little bit more. We did collaborate with the health service, and they asked us to do projects, but they were in a fire, and they didn't. The
whole world was on fire.
Yeah. So look, I won't go into that one too much, but we had, there were challenges. There was definitely challenges, but there was more good things than challenges. So
it sounds like you're describing some of the common challenges of open source projects, right? And many don't work out long term because they don't solve some of those things you just mentioned. And the ones that solve for these things often, I think, do work out. It's
absolutely
our belief, about what's happening in the world right now is that a lot of the lessons learned in just the pure software world over the last few decades is now starting to translate itself over to healthcare. And I believe there are going to be a lot more of open source type projects like this. And I think it's really exciting to see. You're the first one I came across, and considering the amount of people you had come in and out, I think there's a lot of great lessons learned, and people involved in this are going to have a lot of opportunity to be part of future programs to kick off, Jill. So I think it's fantastic.
Absolutely. And anyone that came into OSVX, I have to say, genuine, anyone that came in as a newbie were absolutely,
Yeah.
we all had the same values. We all had the same fears. I mean, the value was about the patient at the end of the day, not just the
Yeah.
patient, the person, the community, saving lives. And the biggest fear, we all had the fear, obviously, of the pandemic and the virus. And we knew, I mean, we were advocating and with the education out on face masks back in March. We had even face masks outside
Yeah.
back in May. I mean, this was unheard of anywhere else. We were advocating at the very earliest stage, and we were looking at all the different information that was coming from all the different countries. So we had a bit of a lobbyist group going, without being political, but we did try our best. Definitely. And even from the beginning process, it would have been all about borders closing and everything else. So the reason I'm saying that is we all had the same values, we all had the same fears, and that's what made it a really, really strong community.
Looking back on the experience and under the assumption that what you folks have done is one of the first times, right, in healthcare, this is kicking off, but it's going to happen more and more. Any advice you'd have for others outside of what you've shared already who are interested in doing something similar in future?
Wow, I hadn't thought of that one, but do you know what the funny thing is, Robert? I've had about 5 or 6 different calls from different people that are setting up something similar now, and now for the future going ahead, and not because of pandemic, and they're not looking at the infection control or anything like that. Just in general, and a lot of them are actually financed by universities. And this is throughout Europe, and I've had one from the US as well. It does seem to be, they've actually called me and said, look, it looks like you've already formed what we're trying to do for the last number of years. And I said, it just happened because it was a need. And I think you create people wanting to help or join or support when that need is there and it's there right in their face. I don't know, there'll be a period of time where people are just wrecked and they're tired from all this giving, and and then there's lots of other exchanges. So I suppose the question you asked me again was what?
Any advice?
What
did you share with those people who called you?
I suppose just to make sure, that first we had, as OSVX, everybody in the groups that joined in, we were all valued equally, and that is hugely important. However, we didn't have our own ownership on what we had done, on those 30 or 40 projects. I would advise, obviously, to have a structure in place, but yet have the shared ownership, but have a structure in place. Because legally and otherwise, you cannot continue. You can't, we done this all on, I won't say air, but we did. And for even the likes of Qualia to come in and help us and support us in any way. I mean, you were there. If 40 projects were gone to market, you were there to support us with the 40 different projects of the different abilities, whether it be looking at software, whether we were looking at hardware, whether we were looking at a physical medical device. You were there for us. And we also equally had lots of other groups that came in to help and support us, because we had STEAM organizations, we had research centers, we had universities come to us, we had companies. And in the very early stages, when we had no gowns, which is part of PPE, it's that overall gown that you wear, there was no gowns in Ireland, or there was very little gowns, and there was flights coming from China, and unfortunately those gowns were not fit for purpose. We at that point had been asked by our health area, our health procurement, to work on gowns. It was not one of my things, because I had no intention of going down the road to gowns. It was just something I wasn't going, in the projects. And we stopped. It's not that we stopped everything. We set up. We done gowns. We had 6 companies test roofing material to see if the material was compatible with gowns, whether it done everything it said. And I'm talking about huge companies. I don't know if they'd want to be mentioned here or not, but I'm talking about multi-international companies that were willing and able. We actually had companies willing to switch over from wool to actually textiles. We'd other companies that were testing us for, the adhesives. They were testing us for, from the material itself, making sure that it was a virgin material, you name it. So I know I'm gone off on a tangent, but that was the level of stuff we done. And that was early April. Yeah. And we had it tested and we had a solution. And we actually had a design that came from nurse friends of mine in anesthetics in the US that was FDA approved, and lovely hoods and everything else. But it wasn't approved in Ireland, as in not approved. Yeah. They just says, we don't need that here. But now, unfortunately, they're looking to up the PPE values. So I don't know, I suppose, where I brought that tangent on, but that was the level of stuff we done. I mean, that was the amount of collaboration we had.
If I've learned anything,
it was amazing.
Gill, from what you've shared, and I didn't get to ask much about kind of what influenced you growing up that might have led you to be such a self-starter with a lot of this, but I feel like it sounds like just get started if I was to summarize everything I've learned from this chat. You've been awesome. Thank you for taking some time speaking with me today. Before we finish up, is there anything you'd like to share about kind of PerCen Technologies, anything place people should go to read more, or if there's anything you'd like us to kind of share on the show notes, you can let me know.
Absolutely. I'd just say watch the space. Anyone who wants to link in with me on LinkedIn, I'm Gillian Berry Ireland on LinkedIn. But for PerCen Technologies, it's watch the space. The Fluid app is on PerCen Technologies, just as I suppose, for regulatory purposes. Watch the space. The future is there. I'm not sure exactly how I lead with PerCen, but it's opened my eyes too of the capabilities I have. But I know I'm not a business person. That's my only downfall. And
we never are from
not a money magnet.
we never are from it's a learned skill. Thank you so much for taking the time. I've loved this. Please keep in touch, and we'll add your LinkedIn on the show notes if that's okay with you, with a little note on that as well, so people can easily find you and reach out when they listen to the podcast.
Perfect. Thank you, Robert. And I have to say, on behalf of Team OSV and especially OSVX, the Irish Heart Foundation, and everybody else that has been involved with the Fluid app and all the other different projects, I'd like to thank Qualio, because you really have, you put our minds at ease, and, to have a quality mechanism is just amazing. So thank you.
Well, thank you for saying that. It means a lot to hear it, Jill. Have a great evening. Stay safe, and thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of From Lab to Launch, brought to you by Qualio. If you like what you've heard, please subscribe and give the show a positive review. It really helps us out. For more information about Qualio, our guest today, or to be a guest on a future episode, please refer to the show notes. Until next time.